Welcome to Lighten the Legal Career Path. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. Whether you're a new attorney looking for inspiration or guidance, or further along in your career, wondering how to get to the next level, or someone that's just simply curious about the legal world, you're in the right place. We'll be talking to female and BIPOC attorneys not only about their remarkable stories of success, but the challenges they've faced along the way, the lessons they've learned, and their valuable insights about their career and the road ahead. Let's dive into today's conversation. Let's dive into this conversation with Christine Lawton. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So let's kick things off by exploring the early chapters of your life and career. How did it all begin? And when did you decide you wanted to be a lawyer? And what were some of the defining moments that set you on this incredible path and career of yours?
Sure. So I am from a family of 3 kids. I am the girl sandwiched in between 2 boys, older brother, younger brother. And I think that might have, just in addition to my kind of innate personality, that might have been the start of my kind of like negotiating things. So, but I did not know that I wanted to be a lawyer. Funny enough, my father his career was as a union negotiator. But that didn't really, kind of factor into, my presence of mind as a kid growing up. But, it certainly was part of the family experience,
Right.
Lots of dinner table conversations and negotiations and things like that. But I originally wanted to go into broadcasting. I wanted to go into television broadcasting. And with that was this interest in pop culture and, television, film, music, theater, that kind of stuff. And so that's what I studied to do. But as I came up, I just really decided that business was a little too unfair, uh, especially as a woman of color. I did not think that I would get the kind of fair shake that I
The
deserve,
opportunities.
that everybody deserves. So I had a pivot. Well, I didn't really pivot. I just was kind of at loose ends after I graduated. Graduated from undergrad. And at that point in time, I was seeing a man who then became my husband. So, that's all good. But he invited me out to California, and I was really at loose ends. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working at Stanford University at the Center for Research on Women and Gender. And it was run by a woman named Deborah Rohde, who was a professor at the law school. And she was a really just whip smart, interesting woman. And I kind of looked at what she was doing and I thought, well, there's a career. Now, it's a legal career in a very different, ecosystem because she's at Stanford, she's a professor. But it just started me thinking. And so from there, I just literally kind of had this epiphany. I thought, wow, this is the way that I can blend everything together. I can
Right.
blend something that's going to be a little more fair in terms of achievement, right? So, and it's a very typical kind of academic pathway, right? You go to school, you take classes, you get grades, and then you pass the bar, you're a lawyer, and so
Right.
that's your ticket. It didn't really take the kind of uh,
Subjective.
I want to say social skills or beauty contest
Yep.
stuff
Yep.
that I thought was a little more necessary for broadcasting. Um, so I had this epiphany and I thought I can really put it all together and I could work in an industry that was focused on entertainment, film, music, something, if I were so fortunate to do that. So I went ahead and went to law school and got out. And I initially went into a small firm. It was a boutique firm that focused on clients in the apparel industry.
Oh,
So that was pretty interesting to me because it got to the intellectual property issues that I found interesting. I did not enjoy litigation, and that's really where I started. And some of that, looking back, I think that if I had given it more time and if I had matured a little bit more in it,
Hmm.
I probably would have had as much fun as I had wanted to have, because as I grew into my other roles, and there were times when I saw, well, when I handled litigation, did litigation management, I saw how much strategy and just how interesting it was.
It seemed
So,
a little bit more exciting to you on the litigation side.
right, right.
Got it.
Yeah.
So as you started as a litigator at this firm, you then got into a role at Disney straight after. How did you get into that role? That is a big question that sort of always comes up at Round Hill. Everybody in California, in Los Angeles, they want to work in entertainment. Like,
Right.
how do I get that first role? How did you get that first role at Disney?
Yeah. And that to me, it just came down to luck. I wish it were different,
Yeah,
but that's what it was. Back in the day, I answered a classified ad that was printed up in one of the trades, and it was from Disney saying they wanted a lawyer who had 2 to 4 years experience either in transactional law or litigation, which of course describes everybody.
right, right.
Everybody. So I went ahead and put in an application, and I strangely enough got an interview. And this was after some of the kind of typical, and I would say this to people as they are putting their applications out and going on interviews. People are fallible, and what happened on the kind of intake side of Disney is that my application got lost, and then I got a rejection letter, and then I got a phone call saying come in for an interview, and I'm like, wait a second, I thought you didn't
What
want
happened
me.
here?
And so you just have to have some patience and some grace to kind of let those things cycle through. So I did get an interview, and I sat down with this man who was lovely, and he was running the dubbing group. From a business and legal affairs perspective. So all of the Disney animated pictures that needed to be dubbed into foreign languages,
Oh,
that was what he was doing. And so you can imagine there are collective bargaining agreements with all kinds of actors, voice actors worldwide. And so he told me that he needed somebody to run stuff in the office while
right,
he went and negotiated. And I thought that if I accepted this role, I would fall flat on my face because I had no idea what he was doing. And
right.
he was going to be gone essentially 6 months out of the year traveling. And so I said to him, I don't think I'm right for this role. But when you find somebody who is, I could help that person.
Interesting. That is so interesting. As you think about what you said, how do you feel about what you said now at this point in your
Yeah,
career,
yeah.
looking back on that?
I am still surprised that I said it,
Yeah.
but I'm very glad that I said it
Okay.
because I think it was truthful to myself and it was truthful to him. And I remember him kind of leaning back and saying to me, well, actually I get to make the decision as to who will work in this job. I'm like, yeah, you will. That's great, but we had a very good conversation, and so what
Yeah.
ended up happening is that he went back to his boss and he said, "I met this person who's great. I think she's right. She might not be the person for this job, but I know you have another role, and I think you should talk with her."
Oh, wonderful.
And so that's
Wonderful.
how I got my entry role. So then I interviewed with his boss, and he had a very entry level position that was in the home entertainment group. Then it was called home video. And he was a great believer in, the things that we all know as lawyers.
Hmm.
You can't have experience with anything until you have experience with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for
Know what you don't
me,
know.
pardon?
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't
Yeah.
know. And you have to be willing to learn. You also have to be willing, well, you have to be fortunate enough to be with people who understand that as well
Right.
and who are willing to teach you. So I think he saw in me somebody who had been well trained, both
Mhm.
in my, you know, um, in my academic legal career. And then I had a couple years of drafting and just all of that training that goes into just being a grown up working in the legal field. And then when it came to how what Disney expected out of its lawyers, what Disney expected in terms of drafting, what this division expected in terms of drafting and negotiation, and then how that business unit, what that business unit expected out of players on that team. And so I think he saw enough uh, skill, aptitude, uh, kind of pliability
Right.
to make it all work.
Right.
So
We were like, we could work with you. You've got the basics. We can definitely work with you. We can train you. We can develop you here.
right, right. And one thing I will point out is that he was a great believer in, and as am I,
Mm-hmm.
in making sure you have the right kind of personality fit
Mm-hmm.
for whatever the business is. And so I learned that, starting in that role, and I continue to learn that as I was running my own departments,
Right.
because you can get somebody who is just from a temperament perspective wrong for the group.
Right.
And so whoever you're putting into your group as a manager and
Mm-hmm.
as a team player, you have to know the personality of that group, how they communicate with each other, what they expect out of each other, how they rely on each other, how they have fun together. Uh, because you can see, and this is something that he taught me, you can get somebody who is, let's say, the top number one student at the top law school
Right.
and have that person be a miserable misfit
Right.
in your group.
Yeah.
If,
Changes the whole
if
dynamic.
right, you
Yep.
have to have people who are now that person could be someone who fits in the group, but it comes down to things like personality and temperament, and you really want a group that works well together and understands each other. So.
This show is sponsored by Round Hill Legal Search. For the past 10 years, Round Hill Search has been placing attorneys of all levels with our trusted clients, from AmLaw 100 firms to the solo practitioner. Visit us at roundhillsearch.com for more information, to find great legal talent, or to step into your next legal role. How big was the group when you got there? And let's talk a little bit about the diversity of the group. How did you feel going in there as a woman of color as well?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's easy to say that there was no one like me there from the time I got there till the time I left, and pretty much the time I got to my first studio job till the time I left my last studio job.
Wow.
I don't
It's a span of like 10, 15 years now we're talking about.
longer.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was always a challenge. And I want to say just a challenge in terms of thinking about how these teams are put together and why they end up that way. I can say that in my initial role at Disney, I was incredibly well supported. I got great work to do. There were definitely women there. There was ethnic diversity uh, of certain types, but I did not see for a very long time dark-skinned black men. I and black women were very rare, although there were some. But I think there's enough other ethnic diversity to make you look around and go, okay,
Diverse.
That
They check
said,
that box.
yeah,
Right.
that said, the leadership positions were always very, very, uh, very white. There's no other way to say it, and very white and very male, and that continues to this day. So, as uh, an executive, an attorney coming up in these organizations, I think it became harder as opposed to, I don't think it was that hard at the start. I think it got harder because it's kind of like, the pyramid, right? There are lots of people down here and lots of people figuring out their roles. But then when you get up to the pointy top, there are fewer people, there are fewer positions. And when you see over and over again that they're held by a certain type of person, it gets emotionally a lot harder to deal with, in my opinion.
And so, coming up, when you did get to those sort of upper ranks, I mean, you've worked at some of the biggest studios in the world, NBC Universal, Fox, DreamWorks. How did you handle it being at the top and being the only? And what sort of impact did that have on you day to day?
Right, right. Um, Day to day, not such a hard thing, because as you're going on, you've developed a certain amount of expertise and you've developed relationships of trust. And so getting the work done and having some amount of autonomy and authority for what you're doing was okay. I
Okay.
would say where it was always frustrating for me was looking around and seeing opportunities that came about for people who were more who looked more like the people who were already in those roles.
Right.
So, and things like opportunities to move into other kind of lateral positions that were not necessarily legal. Those things seem to be, well, in my experience, they were not made available. Now, you could say it's because I don't have the skill or the aptitude, and people made decisions based on those criteria. But there are plenty of people that I would see throughout my career who arguably didn't have them, and they were given that chance. So that was, yeah, emotionally frustrating for sure.
Got it. And how did you? So you're frustrated by it at this point, even if you were interested in making a lateral move. How did you sort of continue on your path as
Right,
well?
right. That's where I think my personality kind of took over,
Hmm.
and I would say I'm going to figure out a way to do this anyway.
Okay.
So
Right.
um, it, the best example of that I can give is the role that I had at Universal. So, and I will say that in every studio role that I had, with the exception of Fox, I was always in a business and legal affairs role. So it was not a purely legal role. And that has always been my sweet spot. That's where I'm most comfortable, because I can work on true business matters, have an impact on strategy, work on the overall business, as opposed to, okay, you're going to stay in the legal
Right.
realm and only comment on legal risks,
Legal
things
things.
like that. So because of that, there's a little more fluidity, um, because I always had responsibility for commenting on general good business practice and how that worked its way into the whole of whatever transaction we were doing.
If you're enjoying today's conversation, please share with another attorney in your network and send us your questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com.
So there was a point in time when, well, it's going to be funny for your listeners, because yes, there was a point in time before we had podcasts or Netflix or Apple TV, things like that. But there was this point in time when they were starting to come into being, and
Right.
so I did the first Netflix deal for film for Universal, and I did the first Apple deal as well. And
Wow.
so as those platforms
Hmm.
developed and they became purely digital platforms, because Netflix, of course, was a shiny disc platform. You would
That's right.
order
For
a
many
disc,
years, right? You'd
right?
go to that red box, right, and outside the 7-Eleven. That was
Yeah,
Netflix, wasn't
yeah.
it?
I think, well, there's this kiosk called Redbox.
Oh,
Um,
right, right, right.
yeah, but Netflix had, you put it in the mail.
Right. Okay, that's right. That's right. Gosh, wow.
Yeah, way back in the day.
Yes.
So, but as those platforms became more digital platforms,
Hmm.
then I I was involved in some of the initial business discussions.
Hmm.
And then when a decision was made that yes, the business was going to devote some time and resources to this, um, I was not somebody who was given an opportunity.
Got it.
What ended up happening is that the person who was given that opportunity, it, it became too unwieldy because, like everybody, we all had our regular day jobs, and this was just a little portion. So the thinking was do your day job, and in your spare time, do this other digital platform
Got
business
it.
that was growing. And it was too much for her. She had a very big job. And
Hmm.
so when she left, I very quietly
Ah,
went in.
wiggled your way in.
That's basically what I did. And so, I cobbled together somebody from sales and somebody from marketing and, all of whom were very excited to do
Right,
this stuff. But we are all pretty much in the same position, which was do not take your eye off the ball of your day job.
right.
That said, over a period of time, this while I was overseeing this,
Hmm.
revenue went from 0 to $40 million.
Wow.
And so, good news, bad news. Good news
Right.
is that I really got to do something I enjoyed, and it allowed me to take my career to the next step. The bad news was that at this point in time, when all of a sudden digital became a business, it
Right.
didn't matter if it was at my studio or anybody else's studio, it became the hot, sexy thing that
Right.
everybody was having turf wars over. So
Mm.
it went to another division entirely. So
Your hands were off of it completely. Was there any recognition for the work that you had done?
no.
Okay.
And I say that a bit facetiously because
Yeah.
I think the people who know I was on it
Right.
appreciated what I did, and I had all the relationships with all the outside platforms. I had the relationships at Netflix and at Apple and at Amazon and a bunch of the others. So there was recognition certainly that I had gotten these deals done. But I
Hmm.
think at that time it was so difficult for these kinds of corporate structures, these ecosystems to give recognition to
Right.
somebody else when, it's now become
The hot thing
the
that
hot
we need
thing. And
someone else
so
on. We need
yeah,
another face to it. Right.
somebody else needs to be a star of that thing.
Right.
So, it's unfortunate, but I don't think it was terribly personal.
Yeah.
So
When you look back on that period, would you have navigated it any differently as you look back on it?
that's a very good question. I'm not sure what else I could have done
Hmm.
because at the time, the things that I did they included developing business plans and saying, you know, putting myself out there saying I'd like to run this.
Hmm.
And then because I wasn't getting a clear no, I wasn't getting a clear yes, but not a
Right.
clear no either. It's just kind of, you know, things would drag on. And I would say, okay, if it's not me, I propose this person or I propose
Right.
this person. And none of that went anywhere. And I think there was so much fear and concern that
Hmm.
either something would go wrong and the division would get blamed for it, or
Hmm.
it would become so popular that it would get taken away anyway. So I don't know what I could have done differently.
Right.
Maybe I could have tried to have infiltrated the other division that ended up running it,
Right. Right.
but that was a whole other very mature division that didn't need me.
Right.
So
Who are you? Okay, got it. Now, at the time, were you, and it sort of leads into another question for you, over your career, have you had mentors? At the time when this was going on, were you seeking advice from anybody else in the industry, in your world, that
yeah,
was sort of telling you, okay, try and do this, this, and this.
yeah,
This is the chess move for you.
yeah, for sure. And I would say that for the most part, they were outside of my company.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look to people I had worked with or had networked with outside of my company. There were a couple people internally,
Mm-hmm.
but these corporate structures tend to be so political that it's really hard to get um, a commitment that means anything. And
Right.
I don't mean that the person giving it is disingenuous. I mean that
Right.
there's so many other variables that make it hard for the person who's,
Promising
championing
something. Right.
you to be able to deliver.
Got
You
it.
know, so there were definitely, well, the first boss that I had at Disney remained my champion and my mentor
Mm-hmm.
throughout my entire career, and still is.
That's great.
Um, and then there were a couple outside firm lawyers who I
Mm-hmm.
found to be, one in particular was somebody who I worked on a number of litigation matters with over the years. So in all my time at Universal, for sure, which was a 12-year period, he became a very trusted advisor, and he would look out for me not only within Universal but outside Universal. And plenty of times when I'd call him up and I'd say, "Ugh, I need your help."
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And I guess that's another question. So, these mentors, did the relationships just evolve organically, or was there a conversation about, can you be my mentor? I know that when we're dealing with a lot of attorneys, some of them say, I don't have any mentors. Like, how do I get a mentor? How do I get a mentor versus how do I get a sponsor as well? Right? There's a difference in those two things. How does
right,
that happen? So, how did these mentorship relationships develop, or
right.
how did they come about for
I
you?
would say that they were organic. It
Okay.
came from, again, my first boss at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I could feel that he wanted me to be successful.
Right.
When someone wants you to be successful, it manifests very visibly in that person's conduct, how they talk about you, the tasks that they give you,
Mm-hmm.
the input that they ask of from you. So all that stuff, it became very clear that this person was invested in my success. And so there was a lot of trust that we
Mm-hmm.
developed very early. And I would say that with the outside mentors as well, that they're, you could tell that, like, when you call them or text them or something and say, hey, I need some help, they're there. They're just
Right.
there. And you can speak with them in a way that is fully candid.
Right.
And, you know that kind of your secrets are safe with them.
Right.
So, and then, kind of the flip side of that is that whenever I was in a more formal mentor program,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't really work. They seemed to
Interesting. Okay.
have, and that's maybe a function of the ecosystems that I was in, but
Right.
they seem to have a start and stop date.
Mm-hmm.
They were very much, uh, the onus was on the mentee to do
Mm-hmm.
everything. And I'm not opposed to that, right?
Right.
Because in my more organic mentor relationships, it's not like the mentor was reaching out to me and saying, how are you doing today, and
Right.
how can I be helpful? That's not how it worked. But in the formal programs, it felt more to me to be an added burden to them.
Right.
And I think that's why they didn't work. So they might work for some people
Right.
in
But that's your
new
experience.
ecosystems. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to any young lawyer now that sort of wants to get into entertainment? I want to talk more about your current role because you're doing some fascinating work in this new area as well. But
Mhm.
what advice would you give to somebody wanting to get into the world of entertainment and they don't have any mentors in that world?
Right, right. Well, I didn't have any mentors in that world either. I didn't
Right.
have any lawyer mentors, entertainment mentors, nothing. So, number one, I would say surround yourself with people who are like minded. And because then you're going to have just a natural affinity for each other,
Mm-hmm.
for each other's success. And then hopefully, in doing that, you're going to find some people in whatever business excites you.
Right.
And so, uh, yeah, I'd say get out there and try to cultivate a community around yourself of people who you respect, admire, trust, who feel the same way about you in an industry that is, interesting. And then from there, I'm not opposed to cold calling people
Right.
and saying,
Hey,
I
who I
listened to
am.
this, yeah, I listened to this podcast or I saw your TED talk or something and see what happens.
Right. Yeah, I'm a
Because
big advocate of that. Nothing happens if you don't ask, you never know, right?
that's right. That's right.
And I find that people's general nature is to want to help,
Yeah.
right? They want to help, they want to give back.
Right.
So
Right.
you got to take that step in making that call, sending that email, and sort of seeing what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it's got to be genuine.
Yeah,
It can't be just that, hey, this person can get me a job,
right.
because everybody, they can feel that on the receiving end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah,
In
you have
fact,
to
the best way
genuinely.
to go in is not expecting that out of it, right? Is
Right.
not that
Right.
expectation.
Yeah. And it's funny, it kind of takes me back to that first thing, that first interview I had with Disney, because it's like, oh no, this is not going to work. I'm not going to get this job. And there's a weird power in that,
Right.
because I think, again, people appreciate the honesty.
Absolutely.
And when they don't see you as somebody who is, you know, in touch with you for a single purpose,
Right.
right? Then I think it kind of changes the dynamic. And so I would say yes, for people who are, and I'm as much one of these people as anybody else, meaning I'm desperate, right? I want to get on to the next thing. I want to, like, for a minute, think about where you are and how you're going to get there, and it's a long road. So put yourself in the position of sitting back a little bit and being able to say, yeah, maybe I don't want this. Maybe this
Right.
isn't the right thing. And if nothing else, it kind of, tamps down that
Mhm.
desperation that we all feel.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So can we fast forward a little bit? So you had this incredible sort of career at all of these studios, and then at some point in your career, you went back into private practice at a law firm, Nolan Hyman, for a number of years, and you were a partner there.
Right.
Tell me about that experience going now from in-house to Nolan as a partner.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges going back to the law firm?
Yeah. So number one, I didn't. And this is another one where we talked, and they said, "Hey, would you consider coming in?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I don't think I want to do this." And it was really because the time at the law firm, there were so many things that I didn't like doing. I didn't
Right.
like,
Billing. Right.
timekeeping, and
Timekeeping.
yeah. Um, but uh, and this is something that I tell myself continually, and anybody who asks, including my kids, as they're making, their professional journeys. The people are so important, and if you get a good feel about and for the people, that's
Mhm.
really meaningful. And so in Nolan Hyman, I saw people who were very down to earth, very excited by what they did,
Mhm.
uh, always in a building mode. They always, they've got their heads in that space. Like, how do we create revenue for our clients? How do we do
Right.
more than just, provide them with a
Lawyer.
contract?
Right.
And that really synced with my experience thus far, which was I want to be a business partner
Hmm.
to whoever I am serving. So that was great. And so some of the challenges were, and this is something that didn't really sink in until I'd been there a couple of years. I would say the biggest challenge, and the challenge that had me leaving the firm, was
Hmm.
that being in private practice, if if you want to be a lawyer of my age in
Hmm.
private practice, you
Hmm.
need to have spent all the years prior getting there, because
Right.
ultimately I I did not have the time that it takes to develop the clients. And you and I have talked
Oh,
about this.
absolutely. We have had those
Yeah,
conversations.
and
Yeah.
so you need to, you know, you're looking at all
Yeah.
your relationships, and a client can come from any of those relationships.
Right.
I've had now 30-year relationships that may turn into something. But when I had been cultivating relationships in Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies,
Hmm.
it is very, very difficult to cultivate those relationships into one where they will go to a boutique firm.
Right.
And that's a whole other level of complexity that I think I was aware of,
Hmm.
deep down. But
Right.
I think as you're, stepping out there in a firm and saying, hey, I've got these relationships and I can convert them, it doesn't really dawn on you. And at bottom, it is that those Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies need to go to big law.
Right. To be able to handle the magnitude of the matters and the
Right.
deep level
Magnitude,
of
but in
expertise.
addition to that, it is it is possible for the general counsel of one of those companies to say
Hmm.
when something goes wrong. We had Skadden on the case.
Right.
Who could think anything would go wrong? It's
Right.
impossible for that person to say, "Well, I had Christine on it." Like that will get the general counsel nowhere
Right.
if something goes wrong,
Right.
because
Right.
Christine doesn't have Skadden behind her.
Right.
She's got a boutique firm that these people don't know. They know Skadden
The
and
big
Munger
players.
and O'Melveny and
Right.
stuff like that.
Got it.
So that was a bit of a rude awakening for me, but it made perfect sense. It's like,
Right.
yeah, this is what is the reality in terms of the relationships that I have built up all this time and what I can do with them. I need to be on a different platform, basically.
Right. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. As the president and founder of Round Hill Legal Search, I've spent over 2 decades connecting with incredible attorneys day in and day out. I decided it was high time that we share some of their remarkable stories, lessons, insights, and inspiration with the world. Join us weekly as we have wonderful conversations with our guests, or simply a session talking about some career tips, advice for you as you light your own legal career path. So, two-pronged question. At what point did you realize, okay, I've got to go back in-house? When you did go back in-house, you've been working at some fascinating companies with very sort of the NFTs that I've read about, the cryptocurrency. I want to hear about all of that work. But at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to hang my hat up on this law firm life and I'm going to jump into
Yeah,
this whole new world as well that there was sort of no blueprint for? How
right.
did you decide to sort of foray into that?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, things dovetailed together at the right time. But I will say my interest in blockchain
Mhm.
started in about 2016. And
Oh,
so
interesting.
I
Okay.
had started to educate myself.
Right.
And it just really interested me.
Mhm.
I'd gone to a conference and they were talking about blockchain. And I remember it was a legal conference. And I remember given by a law firm. And I remember the lawyers sitting to the left and right of me at this thing were going, I do not get this at all. And I was like, oh, this sounds great. And now I know I didn't understand it, but the general kind of blueprint for it, I thought, oh, wow, if it really does work like that, that sounds great. And so I started to investigate and I talked with a lot of people and I read a lot of books and I read a lot of stuff online. And I will say, in anything new,
Mhm.
and there's so many new areas that
So
are
many.
like no one can stop you from becoming an expert. So if you say to yourself, I don't know about blockchain, I don't know about crypto, I don't know, just
Go
hit
learn.
Google or
Yeah.
chat GPT, whatever. There are so many free ways to start to get knowledge.
Right.
And so that's what I did. And so when so I was still at the firm and I was also working with um, somebody I networked with who was wanting to start a live streaming company, and he asked me would I come in and help. And so it's not like it wasn't a paid job. It was just come help and talk with the guys who are uh, trying to stand this company up. It ultimately didn't go anywhere, but
Mhm.
through that process, I made relationships that then took me into We Knew. In particular, one of the guys who was doing this, potential live stream company, we would have weekly meetings, and he came to this one meeting. He said, "Hey, I want to tell you guys, I'm also doing this new thing called We Knew,
Mhm.
and it's an NFT business." And I was like, "Oh, oh, oh,
Yeah, I know about that, right?
I know about that." And thankfully I did, right? Because
Right.
I knew more about it just because I was interested in it, and I did as much as I could to learn about it. So that was, the preparation coming together with luck. So he told us about this, and then a few weeks later, I saw some posting that they needed a general counsel, and I called him and I said, "Hey, I see you need a general counsel. I don't know if I'm the right person for that, but let's
Right.
chat." And so he put me together with and I did say I might be able to find you somebody.
Right.
So he put me together with the COO and the CEO, and we talked a few times, and then they said, "Would you consider doing this?" And I was like, "Well, yeah."
Right. Was
So
there any trepidation at that point that this was, I know you had immersed yourself in that world, but there was probably still so much unknown as
yeah,
well,
yeah,
and so many areas that you didn't have experience in. Was there any trepidation, any fear about taking this on?
yeah, yeah, completely. I mean, in so many ways,
Yeah.
because number one, do I know enough to be helpful to them?
Right.
Number two, I'm going to leave this law firm and I'm going to go into this thing. And it's a tiny little startup.
Right.
It's
So
got
much risk, right? There's risk all over the place there.
risk all over the place.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with my husband and saying, yeah, I don't know if this company is going to be around, a month from now.
Right. Right.
Um, but it just feels like this is the path I'm supposed to go. And then, and he and I both said, if it doesn't work out,
Mhm.
let's say it lasts a year, you will have been paid to learn.
Right. Very
He
true.
said,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And so, but it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And my learning curve was like straight up
Right. Rocket
for
ship.
more time than I was comfortable at all. And
So we've had this conversation before. Can you explain to us what an NFT is and some of some of the, because honestly I still don't get it, but please try and explain to, because then probably some listeners out there that are sort of like, what is this NFT world, and
yeah,
what are some of the issues that come up surrounding NFTs as it relates to legal as well?
sure, sure. Okay. So I'll try to spend very little time describing what an
Okay.
NFT is. But an NFT is called a non-fungible token. And what that means is like you think about fungibility, right? Money is fungible. If I have $1 bill and you have $1 bill, we can exchange it, right?
Hmm.
And we still have the value of $1 bill.
Right.
So it is fungible. Things that are non-fungible are things that are not exchangeable for each other. So um, in the NFT space, and this
Mhm.
is mostly in kind of digital art,
Right.
uh, there are digital art pieces that are not fungible. They have characteristics, traits, rarities, one from another, completely different. So now my company, We Knew, was bought by Yuga Labs. Yuga Labs is the NFT, the most prominent, I would say, and successful NFT company. And so one of their NFT collections is called Bored Ape Yacht Club. So there are
Yes.
10,000 bored apes. Every single one of them is different. And because of that, they're out on the open market and all of them have different values based on
Right.
the rarities and traits. So how that relates to the blockchain is that the way this piece of artwork is constructed,
Hmm.
it has certain metadata. That metadata then gets associated with a particular transaction on the blockchain. And so it's kind
Okay.
of hardened and cemented. Like this metadata goes with this place in the blockchain. And I think of it sometimes as imagine a parking structure.
Right.
So it's 5 stories and
Hmm.
all kinds of spaces in the parking structure. There's
Hmm.
parking space number 152 on the third floor, and then there's parking space 152 on the fourth floor. They're
Right.
different spaces. You can't say meet me at
It's the same.
132, like, right? So that's kind of the concept behind it, the non-fungibility of it, and then the blockchain. It it is a very public, decentralized um, bookkeeping method, essentially,
Hmm.
because when a transaction happens, there are a number of there's asymmetric cryptography that goes into essentially solving equations to cement that transaction in the blockchain. So it's very hard to pull it out. So
Okay.
that's the technology that underpins the NFTs. So you have these, the concept of non-fungibility in what the metadata looks like,
Right.
then you have it cemented in the blockchain. So anyway, that's kind of at bottom, how this business is constructed. The legal issues that come up are some of them I never had to deal with before,
Right.
and nobody had to deal with them because the business didn't exist.
Yes.
So,
Right.
in particular, regulatory issues. So, things like anti money laundering rules, SEC rules, um, the NFT slash blockchain slash crypto world
Hmm.
is still going through, a birthing process,
Yeah.
and SEC regulators are trying to figure out what can they regulate.
Hmm.
And so we're seeing things kind of uh, flesh out so that if you have a pure cryptocurrency, it is more likely going to fall into other categories of regulation, whether it's just the regulation of money, or maybe it is a security. And there's a
Right.
whole test. There's a Howey test for determining whether or not what you're putting out is a security. That test has been applied to, or at least conceptually, to NFTs.
Hmm.
So, and what we're finding is that the Howey test doesn't really fit as squarely on NFTs as it does for some areas of blockchain and crypto. So, in real time, I'm learning about these underpinning bodies of law
Right.
and policy at the same time as trying to run a business that I don't really know enough about and nobody else knows enough
Right.
about.
Exactly. And that's what I really admire about you right now is this area of the unknown. It's just like day to day. What does that even look like for you?
Yeah. Well, that's something that, strangely enough, like the issues that I'm dealing with now are different from the
Hmm.
ones that I dealt with, but that being in the realm of the unknown has always been something that appealed to me.
Okay.
So,
You have a tolerance for it.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, as I'm going into digital platform licensing with Apple and Amazon, that hadn't existed prior either. So
Right.
I had to make up the deals
Right.
and figure out how to create a language for it, and a language that disclosed enough information to consumers
Mhm.
while uh, preserving the issues that we needed to preserve from an IP perspective.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's a space that I've always been comfortable in, and in a way, I think it's because it's very hard when you're in that new space for somebody to be able to look at you and say,
Right.
"You did
You're
that
wrong.
wrong."
Exactly.
Did I?
You're like, no, did we? Well, let's talk about that. Right.
Exactly.
That's great. That's great. That's a great perspective as well. Didn't I? I think I read that one of these NFTs for the for the board monkey, or didn't it sell for like 24 million at Sotheby's? One of
So
the.
the company that I started at in
Mhm.
NFT land was called and We was founded by a couple real heavy hitters. One is Guy Osiri, who's a music manager, impresario, whatever you want to call him. He's handled U2 and Madonna and all kinds of amazing music groups. He's a founder, and another heavy hitter who
Hmm.
became a heavy hitter was the digital artist known as Beeple.
Okay. Yep.
Beeple set the high watermark for a sale of an NFT, which was, I
I
think,
see.
68-69 million at auction.
Wow.
So
Wow.
these were the people who were, as much as I was like, I don't know if this company's going to last another minute. I was like,
Right.
BioSiri is there, Beeple is there,
Right.
and Michael Figge, who was the CEO, and I got to know him over time, and I got to know him before I was hired, and I thought he's really smart and really creative. He's got a great business head, so it's like, okay, we got those three people. And then the guy who got me into it, who said, "Oh, I'm doing this new company, We Knew." He's a music person as well, and somebody I really, really vibed well with, trusted. I mean, just a really good egg.
Right.
So yeah, so that's how I got into it. But yeah, the NFT world, that 68-69 million dollar price tag.
Mhm.
I don't think it has been surpassed.
Right.
And we are still in the quote unquote crypto winter, which
Mhm.
means, and some of this is because of the regulatory uncertainty, because of things that we've seen with Binance and Coinbase and FTX. There's a
Mhm.
lot of reluctance for even people holding on to cryptocurrencies or holding on to NFTs to engage because they don't
Right.
really know what's going to happen.
Right. Because of the
So,
unknown again.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Got it. What would you say is your biggest career success to date
mm,
as you look back on your sort of incredible career that spanned all this time? What would you say was a shining moment for you?
yeah. Well, I would definitely say it was launching the digital
Yeah.
platform licensing business while I was at Universal because
Mhm.
it was just so difficult to do. It
Right.
was so new, and there were so many obstacles. So ultimately, while the business moved into another division, I took a lot of gratification from
Hmm.
launching it, from playing the part that I played in it, and it it, it helped move a business. We're an industry, right? And
Right.
I had a little tiny part in.
In moving that needle.
Right,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wonderful. So as you are now, and you're working in this world of crypto and NFTs, where do you see your career sort of going now
yeah,
as
yeah,
this world evolves? Like what's going to be next for you? Are you planning on staying here for a while and just evolving as this world evolves as well?
yeah.
Because there's so much. There's like it's wide open as to where it's going as well, right?
Right, right, yeah. Well, I see a lot of promise in blockchain technologies,
Hmm.
to have a really great impact on lots of different industries.
Right.
Distribution, and even something like, take the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Hmm.
If you could put all of that data on a blockchain, I think it would speed up processes. But
Right.
that's the government, and
Yeah.
we're never going to get into that. But all like banking, finance, personal finance, distribution of goods, things like that. Um, any of those things, I think, are things that I are industries that I could get into. But like most people, it's like, you know the best laid plans. Like, I could try to make a plan, and I don't
Right.
think I'd get there. Um, but I really would like to stay in either an entertainment or a new technology industry of some sort. It doesn't have to be a Web3 industry, but keep doing that stuff that I find so exciting. Now, it could also be in a general counsel, business affairs kind of role, but
Hmm.
I do see myself running a company at
Right.
some point.
Okay.
So, if I could plan it,
Yeah.
that's what I would
What they
do.
say, oh, you make a plan and God laughs or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Those were the words I was looking for. Yes.
Right. You make
If I
that
were to
plan.
make a plan, God would be
Right.
laughing. So I try
Right.
not
Do
to.
you belong to any associations, Christine, that you would encourage anybody that wants to get into the world of entertainment to to sign up with and start attending events and for those that
Yeah,
want to get into the entertainment space?
I would say, I mean, any of the bar associations that have entertainment chapters are
Hmm.
good because you'll start to get to meet lawyers who are both uh, knowledgeable about the entertainment space, but you'll get a range in terms of junior, senior people, so that you'll get to make relationships with them, and who knows, maybe they can become a mentor. So
Right.
yeah, the bar associations, and then there some in-house counsel types of groups, like AMEC
Hmm.
is one. Um, uh, then ACG is one, and those are more businessy. That's a more business kind of group. But yeah, look around in your hometown and find what bar associations, or kind of even things like ASCAP, or there are different charitable organizations that have an entertainment focus. One's called like the Entertainment Industry Fund or something like that, and you can go figure out how to become a member or a volunteer for those things.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So another area that I want to touch on with you, we've talked about, I think it's been a reoccurring theme of networking, getting out there and networking.
Yep.
Now the whole world went through the pandemic, and we were all in our homes, and the whole concept of networking for some people is sort of taken a back burner.
Right.
And as I speak to people, I'm like, you got to get back out there. You got to attend networking events. People are sort of getting out a bit more. Do you have any insight or any advice on that piece as we're trying to sort of get back to how it was before? I mean,
Right. Right. Huh, that's a little tough. Yeah, because at a point in the during the pandemic, I had just joined Provisors,
oh yeah,
and
yeah, I'm a member of
yeah,
Provisors too.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like we couldn't meet in person.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of gets down to like, just go out there, just do
Yeah.
it, as much as you kind of are out of practice,
Right.
but you just got to do it.
You
And
got to get back on that bicycle.
yeah,
Have you had any Provisors in person? I've been to like maybe four in the last couple months in person.
right.
But just getting back out, it's kind of strange even I have to say it myself, even, it's kind of strange getting back out there doing, I had a lunch yesterday, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, right. This is, we're getting back on this bike, but
Yeah.
how has it felt for you as well?
Yeah. No, it's felt the same way. And I
Yeah.
actually had a lunch today too. And it's, those muscles, you got to exercise them again. And I enjoy it, and
Right.
I forget that I enjoy it. But there are definitely times where I'm like, do I know how to talk to people
Right.
anymore?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're at the top of the hour. I feel like we could continue talking for a whole another hour, and it's likely that I'm going to have you back on the show
I'd
to
love it.
conversation. But I want to end each show with doing like Erica's Fun Five. So I've got 5 questions I want to ask you.
These are
And
going to be the toughest questions you ask me, I'm sure.
really, okay, let's go with the Fun Five. Okay, so what is the best piece of advice that your mother or another influential woman in your life has ever given you?
All right. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with law.
Okay, that's
It was
fine. Yeah.
okay. It was in the realm of, being a young adult and thinking about like a boyfriend. And I
Yes.
remember saying to an aunt of mine who I adore, I want him to be this and that and that and
You
that.
had your
And
list.
she laughed and she said, "Well, you're going to have to make him because he doesn't exist." And it was
That's
one of those
hilarious.
like, oh, right. Like, stop, just like relax.
That's great. That's great. You had your 22-point list, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's great. Okay. The most impactful book that you have ever read is?
Ugh. Well, it's a book. It's not very deep, or uh, it's not great literature. It's not a novel. But it's called Mind. Well, okay. One is The Mind Gym,
Mhm.
and that it's a guy who has worked coaching athletes to get them out of slumps and things like that.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a very slim, quick, slim book, quick read, but I go back to it time and time again to get myself out of a mindset that isn't helpful,
That's
and
great.
yeah, there are all kinds of anecdotal stories. He's going to some batting cage and there's some batter who has just had a terrible, terrible slump. And he goes out and he sees this guy in the batting cage and he is smiling and he's happy. And he says to him, yeah, like you have just been stinking it up out there. And he's like, well, it's my luck is bound to change if I just keep working at it. But it's like, yes.
That's great. That's great. Okay, the Mind Gym. I'll put that in the show notes so anyone can
Yep.
check out that book as well. What's the one goal that you haven't accomplished yet, but you still plan on reaching?
Yeah, I think, yeah, again, if I could make a plan to run a
Yeah,
company, that would be it.
got it. Okay. The song that gets you off your chair and onto the dance floor is.
There are so many of them. That is my truly happy place. So, but I mean, gosh, like old school stuff like Brick House,
That's a good
you
one.
know, Uptown Funk. There's so many of them. So,
I like those. I like that mixture. Okay, and the best movie of all time is.
yeah, I will say two of them. One is The Wizard of Oz, and
Yes.
the other is Princess Bride.
Wonderful. Christine, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm your host, Erica Moore Burton. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure that you share and subscribe to get new episodes as they come out. If you're an attorney looking for new opportunities, head to www.roundhillsearch.com to get in contact with one of our recruiting associates. And don't forget to send your career questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. Until next time.